Okay, we left off here. So now you know what Darwinian fitness is. Darwinian fitness allows things to be very abundant in the world that are not even fast, like snails. Snails aren't pretty, maybe to other snails they are. They definitely are not smart. They're not strong. They don't even live that long, but they are able to reproduce. And so, in terms of Darwinian evolutionary natural selection thinking, they are very, very fit. So, what is Darwin's theory? Uh, to break it down, Darwin's theory started out with there we go. Okay, a couple of conditions. Condition number one, that the individuals in a population are not identical genetically. Okay, they might look the same to us. Like if I showed you a whole bunch of white rats, they might all look alike to us. But if they actually were genetically identical, then we would not be able to evolve that population until someone in the population ended up with a mutation. Okay, so we need to start out with an individual variation. Now, Darwin was thinking in terms of some of them have, like with birds, he is actually thinking about birds. Some of them have thicker beaks, some of them have finer beaks. He was thinking in terms of that. But we're thinking in terms of they have different versions of their genes. One of them has a version of the beak allele that makes for a very hefty beak, and one of them makes for a more slender, longer beak. Okay? So that's number one. Number two, whatever that difference is, it has to be heritable. And now you know that these things that are inherited, he didn't know, but that's because you have got the genes that are on your chromosomes that are made out of DNA, and every gene is a little instruction manual for how to build a protein. So the birds with different appearing beaks, they have got different alleles for that beak gene that will create slightly different proteins that end up creating those slightly different beaks. And the last condition is differential reproductive success. Even if you did have a gene for different kinds of beaks, if having different kinds of beaks had made no difference in your reproductive success, then it would not be something that would be acted on by evolution in Darwin's theory. So for example, if you have got a whole bunch of pigs that are living on your pig farm, and some of them are red and some of them are black and some of them are brown, and they're just living on your pig farm, and you protect them and you let them just reproduce among their own, then there is no differential reproductive success. They're all equally able to reproduce with each other. And so whatever percentage you have of black and red and brown, it would stay the same over many, many, many generations of pigs. However, as soon as you introduce wolves into your farm, which I don't know why you would do that, but you did, okay, then you would find that there are some colors of pigs that are just really easy for the wolves to find and catch, and that allele of that gene, and so that coat color would end up dying out in your population, and that would be natural selection. Have you ever wondered why, when you look at wolves, they all kind of look alike? I mean, you don't have wolves that are like black and white, like a Dalmatian. You don't have wolves that are like, red. You don't have, I don't think there are any, well, there are red wolves as a whole species of wolf, though. But like of our wolves, they all look alike. How about squirrels? They all look alike. You don't have white ones and brown ones and black ones and spotted ones. They all look alike. Our dogs have got different coat colors because we choose the allele. We act as Darwin's evolutionary force on those guys. But out there in nature, there's one great way to blend in and not get eaten, and that's the set of superficial appearances that become common in that species. Now, in today's lab, you're going to evaluate some of the evidence for evolution. Make sure you watch the What Are We Doing This Week in Lab video that I will make, because I will walk you through exactly what you need to do. There are a couple of activities that are short. They're only like 5 minutes, and you don't get any points for doing them. However, if you do them, you'll do better on next week's lab quiz. So I encourage you to spend those 5 minutes or so completing those assignments. In our lab, we're going to be talking about comparative anatomy, developmental biology, and molecular biology. You already know molecular biology. Okay. Now, let us start with this foundational concept. There's a difference between homology and analogy. Homology and analogy. Homology is the word we use to describe that there are structures that were in two different species. And the reason they're in two different species is because those two different species are related somehow. Okay, so when it comes to homology, let's look at the arm of a human, the leg of a cat, the fin of a whale, and the wing of a bat. Now, when people, back in the day were looking at bats, they thought bats must be related to birds because birds have wings, bats have wings. It's just common sense, right? That they're related, but they're not. They're not related at all. When you actually look at the structure of a bat's wings, you will see that these bones in a bat's wings are the same as the bones in a cat's leg or in our arm. This bone is called the humerus. This orange one is called the radius. This bone is called the ulna. And these little bones are called the carpals. So here you can see there's the radius, there are the carpals. Bats just have super creepy long fingers, and they have got skin that stretches between the tips of their fingers and their armpit. So we would say that all of these legs are related to each other by homology because they have a common ancestry. Now, what is analogy? Analogy happens due to something called convergent evolution. Let me write that down. Convergent evolution. Convergent evolution. When things look alike, but they are not related to each other at all, really, then the reason that they have that trait in common is because they were responding to the same natural selection pressures. And when you have the same natural selection pressures, life has got a few really great solutions to how to be Darwinianly fit. Is Darwinianly a word? I'm not sure. But the Darwinian fitness for surviving those pressures will end up creating a solution that looks the same. So there's simply one really good way to make something that allows an animal to fly. And that way is what we call a wing. So just looking at it, the wings of a butterfly, they look like the wings of a bird, that look like the wings of a bat. We recognize all of them as wings, but that's just because there's a really good way for something that's like an animal to fly. Life on planet Earth never really invented a helicopter version of an animal, but maybe on another planet it will. That'd be cool. Here's a really good example of convergent evolution. Convergent. I've written this down twice. That means it's on your quiz. Okay. This is an armadillo. The armadillo lives in our own southwestern deserts. The armadillo is not a particularly fast animal. It's not slow like a turtle either, but not particularly fast. It's really good at digging. And so it's got these really gnarly digging claws. It also eats insects that live underground, like ants and termites. Particularly, it likes termites. And so it digs into the termite mound, and it uses this narrow nose with this long, skinny tongue to scoop up lots and lots of termites to eat. Now, his particular life, he needs to be worried about being caught and eaten by coyotes and bobcats. And so his way of defending that is he has got these armor plates. These armor plates, that's highly modified hair, believe it or not, highly modified hair. And these plates allow him to still move. He doesn't have a shell like a turtle. He's got these plates that allow him to move. And when he is threatened, he will crawl in, he will dig his way into a hole, roll up in a ball with this part sticking towards the outside. And it's just really hard for a coyote to get his mouth around him. So he's safe. So that's our armadillo. Now, this pangolin is in Southeast Asia. And the pangolin is also eats the same thing. And so he also has claws that allow him to dig really well. And he also has a long, narrow head with a long, skinny tongue. And he also has got plates that are made out of highly modified hair. So people can be forgiven for thinking that these two guys are closely related to each other. They're not related to each other at all. One of them is descended from a carnivore, and the other is descended from, I can't remember what the other one's descended from. They're not related to each other. This is not, why do they look alike? Convergent evolution. If you are going to be an animal that needs to avoid carnivores, and you need to dig in the ground and you're going to eat termites, then there's one great way to look like that. This is an example of analogy. These are analogous structures, okay? Analogous. Homologous would be some other structures. Now, when it comes to evolution, by far the strongest evolution is in our DNA. If you look at the DNA of a chimpanzee and the DNA of a human DNA is 98% identical to the DNA of a chimpanzee. We are more like the DNA of a chimpanzee than a gorilla is. And gorillas are very proud of that fact because chimpanzees are violent little sons of guns, but gorillas are peaceful and they are vegetarians. So humans, 98% identical, not 98% similar, 98% identical. Couple of things. One thing shows you that a 2% difference in allelic variation can create a huge difference, right? Chimpanzees are smart, but they ain't human smart. The other thing it tells you is that when you see that kind of identity, that we can actually track and even give estimates for how long it took to have that much of a difference between we humans did not evolve from chimpanzees, but we've got a common ancestor. And that common ancestor, some of his offspring and descendants went towards becoming a chimpanzee, and some of them went towards becoming a human, okay? We can actually estimate by knowing how frequent genetic mutations are in the population, we can actually estimate how far back we have to go to find the common ancestor between the chimp and the human. And now that I've set that up, you would imagine that I knew that number, but I don't, okay? We're going to start here. Here, yes, no. Let me say one more thing. When I say genetic identity, what I mean is if you line up the number of amino acids, or even go even more closely, the arrangement of the nucleotides in a gene for DNA, and then you check and see how identical they are across different species, that's what we mean by conservation. And phyla, you can see here, this is the gene, the protein in a cow. This is the protein in a camel. This this is the protein in a human, okay? Now, if we look at cow, camel, human, we can see that, oh, that particular amino acid is different. That one's different. That one, all of the ones that are gray, they are all identical between cow, camel, and human, okay? This particular gene is also found in insects. So you can see that if we look and we see how similar it is in the silkworm, you can see that this particular gene, that amino acid is conserved all the way down to the silkworm. This one, silkworm. This one goes all the way to a silkworm. This one all the way to the silkworm. This area here, look at that. Look at how identical this particular protein is going all the way down to a silkworm, right? We are going to start there at the beginning of our next video.